Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to a hopefully new segment of my channel where I discuss most interesting discussion conductive threads on r/fantasy. And today I would like to discuss this thread, which is user named Watcher of Cadnua asking, why is it that when people ask for quote-unquote realistic fantasy and character, they list a bunch of murderous villain main characters as examples? And then they go on to say that they disagree with the notion that realism is the same as violent criminal anti-hero behavior and such. And I don't necessarily disagree. I think this is a common thing, specifically on Reddit and outside of Reddit, when you talk about books that you'd like to recommend. And I have several sort of explanations for it. First of all, let's talk about Game of Thrones. And this is the most probably common answer here. A lot of people say that they blame Game of Thrones, but the answer I agree the most is this one, this first user with this paragraph. And they say something very, I think, crucial to understanding is when publishers and authors talk about realistic fantasy, in quotation marks, they meant fantasy that was realistic in the same way Game of Thrones was realistic. And that's the way readers use the term, and that's how it spreads. Meaning that realism is such a relative term, and publishing business being what it is, it's easy to attach hype to something in order to sell something else. And this is how the so-called grimdark subgenre of fantasy was born. And again, the sort of perpetrators, progenitors of it are oftentimes listed as George R.R. Martin with his, of course, The Song and Fire trilogy, and Joe Abercrombie with his The First Law series and The Age of Madness. And my argument is they aren't even grimdark in my opinion. Not because they're extreme or not extreme enough, but because I see it as an effect of one thing being influential to so many people, and these people become authors, and these authors then write books and influence other people, and those other people are influenced by the second wave of people and no longer influenced by George R.R. Martin and Joe Abercrombie. And these second, third, fourth wave and so on authors who go in these super nihilistic anti-hero based stories, they are grimdark for sure. But when you peel back and look at the source, I don't think there's that much in common with Joe Abercrombie, for example. Because yes, his stories are violent, and yes, his stories break fantasy conventions, but they aren't, I think, gleeful in it. The writing is bleak, sure, the worldview they portray is bleak, but there's still an element of emphasis on plausibility. Yes, bad things happen, but also good things happen. And a lot of the people fall somewhere in between. Which is to say, a lot of people have the capacity to do good deeds and bad deeds, which I think is the whole sort of appeal of their writing. My second argument being that this is all also reactionary. Nothing exists in a vacuum, and fantasy trends are one of the things that don't exist in a vacuum, and there are a lot of reactions to trends in fantasy. For decades we had, with exceptions of course, but the dominant storytelling structure and style was the archetypical righteous heroes defeat murderous, thieving, immoral villains. And that was the thing for 20-30 years in fantasy. And people grew up reading those stories, people like Joe Abercrombie, for example, and they, while still being a fan of fantasy, wanted something different, something more, got sick of it, and started to view those stories through different lens. What if the hero of the story is actually a rich, spoiled brat who has some ability, let's say with a sword, but only because he came from a privileged, rich family who had the capacity to train him? What if the wise mentor wizard character was still wise, but didn't necessarily have the best interests of his mentee in mind? What if the noble, promising hero who had his whole life in front of him and who would be a hero of any other story becomes a husk of a human being who inflicts torture onto other people because he endured unimaginable trauma? And what if? And that's how you get, for example, the First Law, which, despite its grimness, I think it's still very entertaining. There's still a lot of humor in it, a lot of gallows humor, I admit, but still very entertaining. So this is a reaction. And now we have what I've observed as a new wave of reactions, this time against grimdark, and this time with less catchy subgenre names. I've seen the words hope punk and noble bright being thrown around, and I think these are ridiculous, and I don't think they're gonna catch on, because I mean, yeah, sure, I too enjoy low stakes slice of life stories with some conflict still at the core, of course, but those terms are just silly. I think they're not gonna catch on. But hope punk is a new reaction to the current wave, and I'm sure if hope punk catches on and it becomes the dominant new thing, some years down the line we'll have another wave which is gonna be who knows what. I don't know. Hopefully some weird mix of fantasy and science fiction a la Roger Zelazny. But yeah, that's my second argument. And my third argument is very simple. It's that the majority of people read the most known authors, and that's only natural because the well-known authors have backing of big publishing houses and therefore have more exposure and more ways to be read by an average reader. And when an average reader reads those authors, they go to a place such as a forum or a subreddit such as r/fantasy, and that's what they offer as a recommendation because A, they liked it, B, they know it enough to recommend it. And that's it. That's all it is. So these are my ramblings, unscripted musings on the subject. Tell me how you feel about it. And yeah, have a nice one. And as always, thank you to my Patreon supporters. You are the best. And thank you to all of my watchers. You are also the best. I love you all equally. And please do subscribe if you're not subscribed and you are enjoying this and watching this. And as I announced in the last video, my next sort of specific video is going to be about comics that are not superhero kind. I have a few songs already composed and recorded, which are gonna come very soon. And that's about it for me. And take care, everyone. Bye-bye.